Congress is attempting to pass the Electoral Reform Act. And just to make sure I got that term correct, the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act. Okay. So what it's attempting to do is change in minor ways the in-law breakdown of what's supposed to happen within the House and Senate after the presidential election. Because we saw Donald Trump took the chance after the 2020 election in every different area to try to cast enough doubt and challenge the system enough to stay in power, right? And so one of the ways he did that was come up with this weird plot with the advice of a bizarre lawyer, as was outlined in the January 6th committee, to challenge the electoral vote counts within different states, have Vice President Pence possibly recognize other electors that weren't the actual electors but pretend they were, so that Trump could have a justification to stay in power. So, reasonably, Democrats and Republicans are gonna change it a little bit and put in law what's supposed to happen with that electoral count process. Because it's one of those situations where there was some ambiguity there, but it was understood based on all of the constitutional precedent as well as just the constitutional text that there would be no intention under anyone's interpretation of our Constitution that a vice president should have the ability to reject the election results. But as is the case with so many of these institutional norms, it's not necessarily written perfectly laid out. Hey, if you're a buffoonish president, don't try to overturn an election because you lost and you were a baby and you didn't want to get it, right? It's not going to be perfectly laid out every single possible thing. If you've ever read the Constitution, it's not that long. So obviously every hypothetical is not going to be put in there. But it's a given that based on the text that is there, the assumption should be, no, you can't attempt to stay in power when you lose, right? But they're like, wow, clearly this had never happened before because every president went along with that. But clearly we need to put it even more explicitly in law to make sure someone like Trump doesn't come along and try to do this again. Well, Ted Cruz disagrees. And interestingly enough, actually McConnell is very pro this bill, as well as many other Republicans. But Ted Cruz speaking out against it. I'll show you a little bit of this and then we'll discuss further.
Bad policy and it's a bad bill. This bill is bad law, it's bad policy, and it's bad for democracy. There are serious constitutional questions in the bill. The text of the Constitution, Article 2, says each state shall appoint in such matter as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. This bill is Congress trying to intrude on the authority of the state legislatures to do that.
No.
But it's also exceptionally bad policy. Unfortunately, I understand why Democrats in this body.
Okay, then he goes on to say it's about an obsession with Trump and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But as I mentioned, and then we'll get to a summary from actual Congress about what this is about. But Mitch McConnell's on board. Reading from CBS, McConnell says he supports Senate's electoral count reform bill. Senate majority, that is not correct. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on Tuesday announced he'll proudly support bipartisan legislation in the Senate to reform the Electoral Count Act, a move intended to prevent a recurrence of the events of January 6, 2021. That is hilarious. They put Majority Leader. So the most powerful Republican in the Senate is on board with this piece of legislation, which means likely the caucus will go along with it, which is good, minus Ted Cruz and likely a few others who are going to pretend like this is an attempt by the Democratic Party to go after Trump or something. But regardless of if you think, yeah, it was sparked by Trump's actions, and so in that sense it is a response to Trump, you should stand for what this bill actually outlines. So I wanted to actually pull this up on the show because I noticed in personal conversations, people aren't aware of this and they think that it's some secret thing, the specifics of bills. You can go onto congress.gov and get information about things that are being proposed and attempted to be passed, all that type of stuff. And here's just the summary that they put out about this bill. And it pretty much outlines that the rules aren't being changed, they're being put into law. What was already the process is now being put into law, and making sure that it is clearly and undeniably written into our laws that someone can't do what Trump attempted to do, right? So that's good. This is not trying to hurt Republicans unless you want to admit as a Republican that you want to try to stay in power when you lose elections. It's just to say, once election results are decided through the process that's already set up, that's not being changed, they need to take those results and follow them. Take those results and make that the reality of who's president, which is obviously what should be the case all the time.